All right, Jarvis, final segment of the show. I don't want to spend too much time talking about them necessarily, because as much as some conferences have that camaraderie of like, oh, we just want to see whoever from our conference, succeed the most or whatever. Ultimately, you want your school to be the team representing your conference, whether it's in a national championship game or whether it's in the playoffs, whatever be the case. And for the instance of the Miami Hurricanes, who they were this past season, and the impressive run they were able to make, you look at Georgia Tech and think to yourself, okay, Jarvis, how does Georgia Tech kind of copy this formula and be the team that we're looking back on and looking at January going like, oh, that's how they pulled off a run to the college football playoff?
3 words: fix your issues. What was the biggest issue last year? The defense and stopping the run. You just couldn't stop a nosebleed, right? I feel like Jason Semore is putting together, and Brent Key are putting together a nice staff when it comes to, experience. If they're able to pull off the Brian Jean Marie piece, and they brought in Vinny Sunseri, to help deal with those safeties and get those guys coached up, and you have a significant jump in turning teams over. I feel like that's how you get back into the playoffs, because if they would have had that against Pitt, it would be a whole different conversation. We'd be talking about how you can get back to the playoffs and potentially make a run, because, it's levels to this thing, right? So, because, that would ultimately hurt them, because you had the offense. You had Haynes King, the guy you can just get a ball and say, hey, man, take us to the promised land, right? But that defense just did not come through for you for the last month of the season, and ultimately left you out of the playoffs. So I feel like they have to start with fixing their issue. And it's seemingly, if it works out, if the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets get to the playoffs, we're going to be looking back and saying that Key knocked it out of the park when it comes to hiring assistants, because that's where the eyesore was. That was where they were bleeding and they could not figure out a way how to stop it. And he brought in the guys that to fix all of that stuff. So, yeah, if we're talking about a playoff bid in 2026 for the 2026 season, it's because Brent Key hired the right guys.
If we're talking about a 2026 playoff bid for Georgia Tech, it's because Justice Haynes is a Heisman candidate. And I think that's a huge part of this all. I think this is a situation where, what did you look at what Miami has been successful at? They hit on their transfers. And I think, getting it's so funny.
And they hit hard too on defense. Yeah.
Say what?
They hit really hard on defense too. So
yes.
That's a good thing. Yes.
100%.
Old school ball, not ball.
Yeah. But I think, like, their defense clearly speaks for itself. Sure. But what they've been able to do in the transfer portal, bringing out pieces, and yes, I know Georgia Tech fans hate hearing his name, but like what Carson Beck was able to do for the Hurricanes this past season mattered. Now, were Miami fans at times out on Beck and thinking like, did we make a mistake? Yeah, but ultimately, he got you there. And so I look at and Beck, for a large portion of the season, had his name amongst those conversations, just not ultimately when it got down to the end of the year. And so I think you've got to have that standout offensive player who is able to carry you. And a guy like Haynes, who, I mean, when we talked previously about him, knowing that he only played in 7 games last year and had 10 touchdowns, like, he can find his way to the end zone. And as much as it is going to be so vital for Georgia Tech to, yes, be able to stop opposing offenses, specifically being able to stop the run, and it seems like they are on their way to being able to pull that off, they got to score points too.
No doubt.
And while the quarterback position isn't going to be the fancy schmancy transfer, your fancy schmancy transfer was your running back in Justice Haynes coming from Michigan. And so I think that's going to be a big piece of this all. And then having the guys that you already had on your team develop and make some big strides, quite honestly, year over year in their progress, and not regress, because I think there were a lot of people who, kind of wondered if Miami was going to regress from having a Heisman Trophy winner and knowing how much money they were spending on the program. That's one thing that I think Georgia Tech can't necessarily compete with, if we're just being completely honest, is the amount of money that the Hurricanes spent on their program. But it's also about using that money and hitting on the guys, whether it's a Jaylen Mbakwe. Maybe he's the guy who just completely shows up on the scene that you didn't expect. That I still hope we see some version of a Travis Hunter playing both ways sort of thing, since he has that talent. But it's having some expected result actually show up, and then getting quite a few other performances from guys that you maybe didn't expect to see, including some freshmen, like Malachi Toney.
Yeah, man. I think that when you look at what the coaching staff was coming at the end of the season, what it is now, and I think that if we're talking about, like saying, being in the playoffs, you talk about having a Heisman candidate. If you have a Heisman candidate in Justice Haynes, that means George Gossett did a hell of a job calling play.
Right.
No? And, like, I know both of us were kind of like not impressed by that hire for the offense coordinator position, because, he hadn't coached in college since 2010. He had some moments when he was a play caller on the NFL level that didn't necessarily work out for him. So if we're saying that, Tech is in the playoffs, they make a playoffs, win or lose in that first round, we're definitely looking back saying, okay, he made the right hires on the offensive side of the football as well, because like, you don't have a Heisman candidate at the running back spot and people aren't looking at your offensive coordinator like, oh, okay, I see what you did there. Especially when you got as of right now, you're going to have a first-year starter at the quarterback position. So that will be a big kudos to Key from a hiring standpoint, just building the staff and being able to have the gumption to go get a big time running back like Haynes and pair him off with a guy like Malachi Hosley. So yeah, man, if Haynes is a Heisman candidate, that means George Gossett was the guy.
And I will be eating crow on this show if that happens. Like, that is,
what I'm saying? We'll get a little barbecue. What I'm saying?
I don't know if I got to worry about what kind of stuff that they eat, but I will gladly, like, I'll do something wild on this show, Jarvis, like full stop. Just because I would be.
Can I come up with what it is?
Yeah, if we've got listeners who have something that, if I am wrong about George Godsey, you would like to see happen on this show, if they are in the playoffs in 2026, drop it in the comments.
Please,
and we will make it happen, because
I will make sure that Caleb does it as well.
Yeah.
For those you have doubt, yes.
Yeah. Maybe anything short of like permanently altering my body with like a tattoo or something. I don't know, but regardless, drop it in the comments, because that's part of this whole thing of, if you're listening and thinking, well, that's a complete pipe dream, okay, then you aren't necessarily a believer in what Brent Key has put together in this offseason. And George Godsey would be a big part of that. But if they do find that success, it's because Key hit on this and we were all wrong once again, which a lot of us, if we're being completely honest, were wrong about Brent Key in the first place and the fact that he's led Georgia Tech to this level of success to this point just all together. But all right, Jarvis, that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Georgia Tech. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and anywhere you listen to podcasts for free. Follow the show on social media. Jarvis is at JarvisD90. I'm at ATL Johnson 18. Thank you for making Locked On Georgia Tech your first listen of the day. Join the Everydayer Club and get Locked On Georgia Tech with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedongeorgiatech.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. For Locked On Georgia Tech, y'all have a good one.